Right. Well, we're light tonight. That's okay though. Um, Everybody's all wrapped up in fall things. What's going on? Okay, as promised, talk about the movie analysis project. This, so you can start getting your your ideas together for what you might want to do for a movie. This is all stuff that's on Canvas here. So I'm just pulling up the kind of rubric and the description of the analysis. This is meant to be like a fun type of project. I mean, I think everybody like movies. I used to do group projects, which were fun, but when everything went online and half the classes online, or I've got online classes, those became a lot harder to organize. So much easier to work out when everybody's in person. So I switched from that. It was a good project though, because I had groups make a timeline, like they'd use Satori, and you do a timeline on a theme, like pick whatever, like American history through the lens of photography, and then just kind of go through, advances in photography and stuff like that, that really, photos that were capturing the moment or saying something important about that time period that we're looking at. So here, this is, a paper, 8 pages ish is kind of the goal, 7 to 8 pages. Loosely, what you want to do is spend a couple of pages on each movie and have a solid page at the front and at the end of the project. So picking 3 films that have to do with American history in between 1865 and now. So, Gangs of New York, great movie, but it is taking place during the Civil War. So it's like right before our class starts. There's, all kinds of other movies that are about important historical events, but are not based in America. So making sure that it's American history. Now, I mean, we're in modern American history. So, one of the big themes of the class, if you haven't picked up, is the increasing globalization of everything, being connected. So it's a little easier to go outside of just strictly in America. For instance, somebody asked me last week about some Holocaust films, which clearly doesn't take place in America, but there are, I believe there's more Jewish people living in America than anywhere else in the world. It might be about the same number as Israel. So like we've got a lot of Jewish folks, and particularly like LA and New York, but all over the country. And it's such a large event that I feel like there is room there. So what I told the student last week, asking about films like this, was okay, maybe take one film about the Holocaust, The Pianist or Boy in the Striped Pajamas or Schindler's List, one of those. But then also maybe take another film that is also about the Holocaust, but actually not directly like of the Holocaust. So I can't remember the name of the film now. I can look it up, I'm sure, I guess. It came out a few years ago. It's got Oscar Isaac in it and Jessica Chastain. I love both of those actors. They're great. and they're Mossad agents, which is like Israel's CIA, essentially. They find Adolf Eichmann, who is like the mastermind of the Holocaust. He escaped at the end of the war and was living and hiding in Argentina. And so they fly in, it's a super secret covert mission. They kidnap him, sneak him out in a plane, fly him back to Israel, and then put him on trial. I think this is like 1963 or 64. And so they're trying the Holocaust, but in front of a world stage, because this is going to be one of the first events that is globally broadcast using satellites. Like that's a new thing, right? And so this is this kind of like pivotal moment in world history that is not directly, tied to America, but certainly is affecting America and every other country in the world, because more than ever, the horrors of the Holocaust, 40 years after the war is over, are going to be really put on display for the world to see. So I said, okay, well, maybe do like that movie. And then another movie that comes out I think it came out in 1946 or 47, is the Nuremberg trials, or is it Trial at Nuremberg? It's about the trials at the end of the war for the war crimes that the Nazis committed. And the Chief Justice is actually an American judge. It's like a tribunal of judges from several different nations. So, like, okay, those three films, I feel like you could put those together and analyze not just the Holocaust in like what it is or was, but really the kind of world impact that has and why it's so significant for everybody, including Americans. There's maybe a few other topics like that where it's so big and momentous that I'm like, okay, maybe we could go outside of American history. So anybody in here see The Imitation Game? Benedict Cumberbatch, he plays Turing, Alan Turing, who basically invents the modern computer, like modern computer language. He does it. So it's all in Britain. It's like the British military essentially doing that, but it's such a pivotal thing for our world and our history that okay, if you were pairing that with a couple other movies on the computer or that kind of development of technology, that works. But outside of like some of those bigger exceptions, you want to make sure it's in the bounds of American history. So I put, if you've gotten a chance to look this over, I used AI to do this. So I made like a very extensive list of movies that would fit in this, this assignment. Some of them are fictional. Oh, that shouldn't be 1980. Babylon. This is a different Babylon. I need to update that. Some of these movies are like Doctor Strange Love. It's like a kind of farce. It's a comedy. It's Kubrick's attempt at comedy. I think it's pretty funny. It's filmed in black and white, but it's kind of about the like the madness of atomic bombs and atomic warfare and the anxiety that we all live with, whether we've realized it or not, that we could all disappear in a moment. That's not an anxiety that people lived with before World War II and the creation of atomic weapons, right? You could get annihilated, but it'd take a giant army coming to wipe everybody out. And it's not going to be instantaneous. There's going to be warnings of that. So it's a fictional movie, but it is very much addressing real events and kind of real anxieties and issues at the time. Same thing, Clear and Present Danger is Tom Clancy novel. It's, you know, it's fictional, but it is really definitely getting at the heart of the drug problem and South American and Mexican cartels and kind of the corruption in American politics that led to the drug crisis of the 80s, really, 80s and early 90s. And like when it was made in 1994, it's a pretty stunning critique of the American government for, you know, a movie to come out. Chinatown, another fictional movie, but it's about real events. It's about the building of the aqueduct, the Owens Valley Aqueduct project, and bringing water to Southern California, basically like creating LA. LA could not survive based on the water that we have. So some of these are fictional. A lot of them are, you know, they're dealing with real events, real people, real history. So let me go back to the other. So in this, I just threw out kind of a, hey, here's a handful of themes if you're trying to look for a theme or a way to sort through the movies, because it's a long list. It's a lot of movies. It could be quite overwhelming. Here you've got all kinds of options, right? So labor unions, you've got a good handful of movies that should be bolded, but political corruption, there's no shortage of those things. The war on terror. You could do something where it's like, oh, you want to do like 3 movies with Tom Hanks in them. It's maybe a little bit harder to pull the threads together on some of those things. But you could do the same thing with directors as well. Like Kubrick's a great choice. Martin Scorsese, which, by the way, his film is coming out this weekend. I think it comes out Friday, Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, it's going to be rough to watch. Like, I'm not looking forward to watching it because it's about this horrible tragedy that the American government essentially perpetuates on the Oswego people in Oklahoma. But you know, he's definitely somebody that's wrestling with American history in a lot of his films. This one's based on real events, where other, you know, some of his other movies maybe are not, but they're again dealing with real issues. So this is not an exhaustive list. You do not have to have one of these themes. You can come up with something else or a different topic or subject entirely. But you know, this is maybe something that can at least get your motor going. Yeah, this is like something to get your wheels turning in your head. I've watched a lot of films. Like I like film a lot. I've watched all of the movies on the AFI Top 100 list, which there are some kind of crappy movies on that list, actually. This is like some of it was a little bit of work going through. And in this list of films, I have seen probably 80% of these movies. There's definitely some that I haven't seen, or some that I maybe saw a really long time ago and don't remember anymore. But I would encourage you to make at least 2 of the films you haven't seen yet. Yeah.
So as far as like,
yeah, good question. So up here, you know, I give you kind of an overview of what it is and what I'm looking for. And then this is how you want to structure it. You want your intro. So this is how you want to structure each maybe film section that you're writing. So you'll have an opening page introduction, and then give a brief intro for the film, set it up. What's the thesis of the film? Like, what's the point? What's it really trying to say? And not just, if you picked a movie like we were mentioning Jesse Owens, the track star yesterday, like the thesis, if you're writing a thesis for your film like that, this is about a guy that ran in the Olympics. That's a shit thesis. Like, don't do that. Like, give me kind of the meat of what is going on there. Like, oh, this is a film about an athlete that highlights the, inconsistency in America's statements about equality and, opportunity. Okay, that's better. And then because it is like you're talking about film, get into the nitty gritty of the film, like on a film level. Like if you've never written a film critique or review, I'm not expecting it to be amazing, but talk about the elements of it. What was like, what'd you like about it? What was compelling about the movie? What were maybe weird choices that you didn't understand or would have picked differently? Give me the historicity of the film. So what did they get right? What's the setting for the film? Like, give me the real backdrop of that. So, the race, Jesse Owens, that's a different setting for racial tensions in America in the 30s than it is if that event had happened in the 60s, right? Like so give me the setup for that, and then wrap it up, summarize it, and then at the end of doing that for 3 films, bring the cohesion together. So really then talk about the thread that runs through all 3 films. And that could even be very contrasting things. It doesn't have to be, oh, they're all the same this way. It could be, hey, all 3 of these looked at like women's rights or like vulnerabilities, but in wildly different ways. And so that's kind of like the blueprint for writing that. Here's the nitty gritty of the just standard stuff for college papers, right? Times New Roman, 12 font, double spaced. Yeah, and then here's the specifics of like, oh, if you want to get a really good grade, I'm letting you know, oh, these are the things I'm looking for here. If you have a crappy paper, this is kind of what it will look like. It will lack analysis. It will lack good writing. It won't have a lot of facts. You won't be, pulling quotes out from the movie. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's it. Other questions? This is at the end of the semester. So I think it's the last week. I've got it set for probably Wednesday of the last week to turn in. And please, by all means, like if you're we can spitball ideas right now too. So if you're like, oh, I was thinking about these films or this film and that, I don't know how to fit them together. Like, let's do that right now. But then of course, later on, as your thoughts are coming to you, shoot me a quick email on that and say, yeah, these are kind of what I was thinking, or I picked these 2 films. I want to do it on this subject. I don't know what 3rd film to include. I can help you out real quickly on like getting you on track with that. And I'd much rather do that with a real quick, simple email than mark you down for something that we could have, course corrected early on with not a lot of work. So anybody want to volunteer what you're thinking of or have decided, or yes?
There was like a lot of stuff that happened, so
I think so.
and then I went to Bonnie Clyde and
Oh,
Charlie.
nice. I like that. Those are very, very different kinds of killers too, right? You've got like a serial killer, you've got like sociopathic teenagers, and then like a crazed drug kingpin that are all, yeah, they're all like given to extreme killing. So like I think that's a good pairing for those things. And yeah, like because I think because they're so different, you've got three opportunities to talk about like, oh, why are these things kind of happening and why do we kind of immortalize these types of people? What does that say about America, right? Good. Yeah.
I guess to ask you what you would think if I were to like say Nolan, right? When he does Kirk from the Oppenheimer, but I
Oh yeah.
feel like it makes sense for
Okay.
The Dark
I mean,
Knight.
maybe so. Like it so I like, I mean, Christopher Nolan is a genius. Like he's just probably the best filmmaker alive today. Oppenheimer was so good. And yeah, like a great movie to include on that. So Dunkirk is like one of those examples of not American history, right? It's World War II. It is the French and British versus the Germans at that kind of beginning phony war phase. And but it's such a pivotal moment because if Hitler had just like captured or killed all those people, it's over. Britain's out of the war. And they're gonna get invaded and it's done. And it's, you know, Hitler probably could have taken Russia then if that would have happened. Like, is there a way to stop that? So I think that would be I think that'd be good. Like I'd be okay with
Not
it.
necessarily American.
It's not, but it's so consequential for the war that we wind up getting into. So I think I'd be okay with that, especially because Dunkirk is, if you haven't seen it, it is, I mean, it's a great film, but it's like 2 hours of just chaos, right? You're like, the hell's happening? Like it just feels, you feel like you're those soldiers trapped on the beach. And it its lack of a narrative, I think, is what's brilliant about it. It might be one of the best war movies ever made because of that. We find comfort in narrative. And so, you know, yeah, Saving Private Ryan's horrible, but you can kind of ignore the greater scope of the war after you get through the first 10 or 15 minutes of just intense stuff. Um, uh, to talk about, yeah, the kind of maybe the nature of war and the nature of like modern warfare, and maybe as a pivotal point in history that will allow us in.
I was thinking more like the theme of how time, like Oppenheimer goes back and forth, like a war feature.
Oh, okay.
Dunkirk as well plays with time a lot, with three different perspectives.
Yeah.
Different points of time. But like that, I guess that theme is more interesting.
I like that.
I'll have to figure out that.
I mean, Memento. It's his first movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really a history movie at
That's
all.
what
See, like, this is where I'm like, I need to make my historian trump my film lover because that's a good paper. Write that paper, but write it for like film class, right? Um, Got me thinking about like the play with time though. I definitely, it's one of the things I really liked about Babylon, the movie that came out last year, is that it is all about time, right? It's like about this time in the 20s, but the whole movie, like it ends with um, one of the main characters seen singing in the rain in the theater, and like, not to spoiler alert everything, but you know, everybody's laughing. It's a great movie. It's about this transition in Hollywood that this guy lived through, and it's just heartbreaking for him. Um, but everybody else is like finding joy in it. So I don't know.
I'll think more on it, and I'll maybe you know.
Yeah, I'll think. I'll think on it too. Like I like that because I really, uh, yeah, Christopher Nolan does a lot of stuff like that
Yeah.
all the time.
Almost all of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I feel too like maybe Nolan's Batman trilogy would be if it's paired with like two historical movies would be okay because it's not like a campy superhero movie at all, right? It's very like kind of neo-realistic, and our fascination with vigilante characters. So like I think that could be a cool film to do if you did it with like like uh Billy the Kid and somebody else where we're like kind of idolizing these criminals. That's definitely that's something that's I mean, I think other places probably idolize folk hero criminals, but Americans, we've done it for a very long time. Like the most popular form of entertainment, before vaudeville and stuff, is the dime novels about cowboys who are outlaws. They're like bank robbers and train robbers and murderers, but they're become our kind of folk heroes. Why is that? Um, Interesting.
I have a question
Oh yeah.
online.
Hello.
Hi.
You surprised me.
Sorry. So I am when reading the procedure when it says, interest intro, thesis, filming, historicity, summarize, I'm just a little curious about are we doing at what point am I supposed to compare the movies all together? Is that in my cohesion or
Yeah, that's really going to be like what you want to bring it all together at the end. I think that it'll make a good paper if you've got a nice transition thought in between films, right? Like if you're instead of just hopping, so it's like three mini papers, right? Like having a good kind of transition there. So between your first film and your second film, and then maybe between the second and third, you can say like, unlike the first two movies, or like in the first two films, or you know,
okay.
Christopher Nolan has been, we saw that with these two films, and he continues it here. Have like that'll bring a little bit more cohesion to the paper overall. But then, yeah, at the end is really when you want to bring that together to make a strong closing.
Okay, and is there a minimum amount of sources we should have for comparing to like real-time facts or
Yeah, no, I didn't put that in there because, well, you guys are not required to take English 101 before you take this class, even though that's when you learn to write a research paper. And then they want me to have a requirement for a research paper. And I'm like, that's backwards. That doesn't work very well. So use your own like discretion. I would say, and maybe I should add this, but I'd say you want something for each film. You want something from the film, so you've got a quote, right? Or maybe it's something from behind the scenes, like something the director said, and you find a quote there or something on IMDb. So that you're bringing a little actual meat from the film. And then you want something that is grounding what you're saying in fact. So whether it's about the film itself or about the reception of the film at the time or about American history at the time and the events going around it. So, clear and present danger, fictional characters, but you could definitely bring in some statistics on the kind of war on drugs and some background on the whole Iran-Contra affair that happens in the 80s with the Reagan administration. So it doesn't have to be, I'm not looking for like tons of stuff there. I really want more like, give me your thoughts on stuff, but so that you're kind of you're pinning each movie and each section with some actual meat and not just your thoughts and opinions. So
Okay.
yeah. And I feel like, in general, like when you're writing papers, that's whatever they say the requirement is. That's a good way to like ensure that your paper is going to do better than just a shot in the dark. Is if you've got each, in a full research paper, like each paragraph should be locked in with that. I'm not like looking for that much research or outside material. But yeah, like a couple things per movie would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. One of the ones that I really liked, like this first one, Gangs. You could do all kinds of different gangs, right? So West Side Story is like, a romantic musical, but it's about gangs in New York and race gangs, white and Puerto Ricans. But these ones like Boys in the Hood and Straight Outta Compton and Do the Right Thing are all kind of around, black gangs in the 80s. And well, Do the Right Thing's not even really about gangs, but it's about like issues in the ghetto. So I feel like it's touching on the same thing, right? So yeah, or you could do very different types of gangs. Same thing, I like that for killers, like doing 3 very different kinds of killers, or 3 very different kinds of sports legends, or political, figures. There's no shortage of movies, like kind of biopic movies on different politicians. Yeah. Other thoughts? Questions? Yes.
It's not on this, but one of the things I'm thinking about is extraterrestrial.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like that. Hmm. I haven't really thought about that in terms of like, yeah, I actually feel like we need more history, like movies on like Roswell and stuff like that. I think that there's probably a good market for that because there's not like a lot of those. If I would say this, if you picked 3 American movies that are about, extraterrestrials or aliens, it'll be the films themselves, I feel like, will be lighter on historical content because they're not really like history-based movies, usually. I mean, most of them. But you could do that and make it a compelling paper by, say you took a movie from like the 50s and a movie from the 80s and one that's more contemporary. And then really like talked about the films and kind of, the content of the film, but spent a lot more time doing background on American society when each one of those films comes out and what it's saying about our psyche, like our psychological state and thoughts about extraterrestrials, or even how the subject itself is perceived by society at the time. Because, in the 50s, there was a lot of negative campaigning against talking about UFOs. Like, oh, you're crazy. You're a lunatic for doing that. I think because the government didn't want people talking about it. Now you've got like, well-respected academics, saying like, oh, this is like more likely than not. We've got politicians that went before Congress and said, hey, yeah, we've got the goods. It's happened. Like there's, which is wild to think about. So the whole narrative of that, shifts over decades, for sure. So I think that could work. Email me when you've got like an idea of what movies you might want to do.
One of the movies I'm thinking about is District 13. I have.
So I would say not that one because it's in South Africa. Like that's where they land, right? I've seen it, but it's been a long time. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna think about that one. Actually, that because there's probably there's probably room there for that. Um, okay. Anything else?
Clarification. So with this essay, we're not trying to prove anything.
No.
It's our thoughts
Yeah, it's
on these subjects.
yeah.
As my part, like what I'm having a hard time doing is really back to like our history.
Yeah.
So, like how we think it impacted.
How it impacted or just maybe what it says about people when the movie came out, right? So like a movie like The Graduate, comes out in the 60s. It's about some young college kid has an affair with a older married woman. I mean, it's scandalous to people in the 60s, which they were like, yeah, whatever, we've got the internet. We know people are filthy. Like this is not shocking to our sensibilities at all. But so you could just use it to talk about kind of cultural mores and values and
The time period that they could be all from different.
yeah. Well, so like the time period of the movie has to be since 1865. Like I don't want The Patriot or anything, like that's too early. But yeah, they could be wildly different times. So like if you're talking about organized crime, you could look at something like American Gangster. I don't know if you guys seen that. It's such a good film. It's about a real, Frank Lucas. Like he was a drug kingpin in the 60s and 70s, a black man in New York at that time. And maybe then transition to like Goodfellas, which is like the New York mob in the like 80s. And then you could also do Once Upon a Time in America, which is really, really long. It's like 3.5 hours long. It's a great film though. I think it was made in the 70s, but it's about organized, like a Jewish organized crime family in America at the turn of the 18th or 19th to 20th century. So like those are all in way different time periods, with different groups of people and different things happening, but they've got that common thread of like organized crime. So yeah.
So like want to do like reject society. It's just our thoughts. We watch movies, we would analyze each one, and then at the end, and it just go over all three of them.
Yeah, and so like yeah, and for like the movies I've got listed down here, like they're all very, very different too. Like Taxi Driver is disturbing and violent, and it's about like psychosis and like, oh, why is that guy rejecting society, or did society reject him? You know, um, a movie that would be actually maybe a little similar to that would be Rambo or First Blood. I know it's like it gets a cheesy rap, but the first one's really good. And it's about a Vietnam vet who returns and like America's like, screw you, man. Like, and then it turns into like a violent bloodbath afterwards. Where like The Grapes of Wrath is also kind of it's not really society rejecting people. It's more the depression ejecting people. These poor, dirt farmers from Oklahoma that drive across the country in their jalopy and get to California because it's the land of opportunity, and then get here and realize, it's worse here, or it's just as bad, and we don't have any opportunity, and we're struggling, and society is broken down. So when you're doing each one of those films, right, like it's important to give the context of what the character or characters, what their setting is and what they're rejecting, right? Because it's not going to be the same thing for us. People are not returning home from, Afghanistan and being spit on by most of American society the way Vietnam War soldiers were. And like, well, why was that happening? Was it because America just hated Vietnam vets? No, I think it's like they became the scapegoat for American decay. Like the 70s are a hard decade. We get stagflation where the economy, we get massive inflation, but not a growth in jobs and not a growth in like income. So people are suffering. And it's really like the first time this is happening in an extended way since World War II. And this is also really the first war that America is going to lose. And America just was not used to thinking of itself as a loser. So that's really important context there for a movie like, like Rambo. Where I want to look at what other films do I have there on Rejecting Society? Like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh, such a good film. It's about like mental health and how people are treated, and it's rough to watch. It's a rough book to read. It's a great book as well. It says a lot about how America treated the mentally ill in past times. And so, you can paint that picture and then talk about like, this has changed. This has shifted. We don't treat people like this. We're not giving folks lobotomies and like reckless shock therapy and Nurse Ratchet and all of that. And, depending on what angle you wanted to take or dig into on that, you could even point to something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and say, hey, this book and this film, they were both really popular, and they were the book's written by Ken Kesey, who's like he's like the godfather of the hippies. Like he ran around in a painted up school bus with his merry pranksters, and they do stuff like drop a bunch of acid in water supplies at places. Like, we're gonna free people's minds. Like, not a great idea. But the author behind that is a very important figure in American history. And I think that the popularity of that film, it highlighted something for Americans that most people didn't want to think about. And if you didn't have those problems yourself or a family member with those problems, you don't have to think about it. But that kind of pushes the conversation forward for people, and then maybe moves our needle on how we treat people. You are free to do whatever you want, but I think it would be a good idea to like run it by me first. Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. Which is it's how America's treating mental health. But then also like on the backside, because it's a recent movie, it says some stuff about maybe America right now and white male rage and the byproducts of not treating mental health issues seriously. And are we creating jokers? Like, yeah, I think that'd be that movie was hard to watch too, but it was so good. It was a good movie. Yeah.
So I was thinking about doing a little bit of a cop out because right.
Nice.
on psychedelics.
Oh, okay.
So I was thinking about doing on psychedelics, American history within before the war on drugs and after the war on drugs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think that'd be good.
Off the top of my head, I'm not certain of what the full list of movies, but I know there's like The Big Cube, Blue Sunshine, and a couple of other ones that are all before the 90s.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure if there's a movie on it. I feel like there is, but what was the CIA's? It's not Wormwood. It's, gosh, why can't I think of it? They had a whole covert operation where they were like testing LSD out on
Oh,
people
yeah,
without telling them.
they were using American that was
Like people
psilocybin.
killed themselves on acid, like jumping out windows and stuff. And that was the American government. And yeah, I think maybe even I think it could be interesting because the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, right? They come out in the early 1900s and start just banning drugs, right? You know, like, I mean, Coca-Cola used to have, it didn't just have cocaine in it, it had wine in it. It was very popular amongst people, very popular. But you could go to a drugstore and buy heroin. Like, I mean, that's what people had to do when they were in pain. Like, they didn't have like modern pain medicine. You know, aspirin comes out in the 1890s, I think. Lithium, you could go buy lithium. Lithium used to be in 7-Up. This is maybe one of the origins of why, you know, if you've got a tummy ache, drink some Sprite or 7-Up. It doesn't do anything for you. I mean, maybe carbonation is good, but lithium it would help your stomach. Also, though, if you're bipolar and you just kind of found that drinking that soda with lithium in it helped you a lot, like that's, you know, a freedom that Americans don't have. We don't have that freedom anymore. I don't know that we should, but if you went back and kind of looked at a film that deals with that issue. So Once Upon a Time in America, a big part of the movie revolves around opium dens in like Chinatown, part of New York, where you go and they'd hand you a big massive pipe and you'd lay down and smoke opium. And that was like a very popular thing for people to do back then. Has ruinous results on the main character, which is maybe part of the point of the movie. But it was much more, you know, open and free back then. Kind of the same way psychedelics, they were not class A drugs or whatever they are now.
Class A Schedule 1 drugs. They have no medicinal or recreational and are highly addictive.
Right, which acid and mushrooms are not addictive. I mean,
well,
I've read.
I was gonna say, how do you know?
I have a friend. He told me.
I say as the person writing a research paper, a lot of the research points towards psilocybin containing mushrooms or psilocybin toxin its effects are non-addictive. To overdose on them, you would have to rupture your stomach because you would have to eat so many of them before you would actually overdose.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you're doing just psilocybin and taking like DMT stuff like that, that's an actual manufactured chemical. Taking too much of that will do.
I read, I watched a documentary that came out last year on John McAfee, the guy that invented the McAfee antivirus. He's crazy. Like, he was one of the craziest people I've ever seen a like documentary about, because he's like a genius and invented, it was really like one of the first antivirus programs, sold it, and then it became garbage. It's a horrible program. Don't put McAfee on your computer. But he's talking, they're interviewing him and he's like, yeah, before I was doing computer programming, I was selling drugs, and I don't know, I just kept doing it. Even after I got like a, 6-figure a year job, I liked selling drugs. I'm like, you're a crazy man. And he's like, I just decided one day to just overdose on uh DMT. Yeah. He's like, he's like, I don't really remember about 6 months of my life. I've got very like small glimpses where I remember getting fired, I think. I just had all my stuff in a cardboard box. I didn't really know what was happening. Yeah, my wife and kids left me, and like, and he did it on purpose. Like, wow, you just want to like smoke yourself into oblivion. And no, it's called Running with the Devil. I think it's on Netflix. It is fascinating. It is like a really like wild ride to watch. The guy was just he's a crazy man. Like, there are not a lot of people quite like that in the world. Yeah, but like mushrooms, you can definitely overdose on acid. So I can't remember if I told you guys this or not, but in 2019 I started teaching out at the prison. And I don't know, maybe second or third week into it, all the guys were like, all right, like, you're cool. Like, they started telling me like what they were in for. I didn't ask, you don't ask people, right? Like, but one by one, they're on break talking to me, and different people are telling me what's up. The only white guy in the class, I'm talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I murdered somebody. I'm like, oh shit, man. He's like, oh, we started talking about music. That's why, because he was a sound engineer for the Grateful Dead, and he sold acid on tour. And he took some acid one night and just got up and walked across the room and just bludgeoned a man to death with a ballpoint hammer for absolutely no reason. Prison for the rest of his life. So like, yeah, you could definitely, you can lose your mind on that drug. But yeah, like mushrooms, which, I mean, they just grow naturally. You don't have to do anything to them.
Not only that, a lot of mushrooms are actually being looked at and advised for therapeutic use for people with PTSD, depression, anxiety,
Mhm.
but it's associated with identity disorder, bipolarism, schizophrenia, and depression.
Oakland decriminalized mushrooms. And I think there's a bill up in California right now to decriminalize.
Just because
Oh, shucks. Well, got to get your mushrooms illegally, I guess. And like this is a little bit beyond the scope of the project, but you guys should feel free to dive, like if it's a subject like that, right? Dive into how that's changed in America and our nature and relationship to things like that. And then also kind of maybe on a bigger kind of esoteric level, like, oh, what does this say about our society and freedom and control? And we seem to have kind of arbitrary laws when it comes to stuff like this. And if we learned anything from prohibition, like legislating people's morality doesn't work very well. Like, people can do what they want to do, like, yeah. And I'm not saying, oh, let's have heroin in Rite Aid. Like, I don't think that's a good idea, right? Like, we've got all kinds of problems right now with fentanyl and everything else. But yeah, I think looking at, if you can find enough meat with movies to make it all on psychedelics, that's cool. I think that works. If not, though, I think looking at movies, have you seen Made in America? Tom Cruise. It came out maybe like 5 years ago. Great film, true story. He becomes like, he's a pilot, and he becomes a drug runner for, I don't know, like one of the Colombian cartels. But he's on the payroll of the CIA, and they're paying him to run the drugs, because then the CIA's taking, it's very complicated, but taking that money, using it to fund like rebels in Nicaragua, which Congress prohibited Reagan from doing. So he finds all these like loops around this stuff. And they're doing all of this while they're saying, like, we're having a war on drugs. Nancy Reagan's just say no, which did not work. It categorically didn't work. In fact, I mean, I was a kid in the 80s. Like, I didn't know about most of those drugs until I saw the Just Say No commercials and stuff. I'm like, oh, what's that? Oh, I've never heard of that. Friends are like, I want to try that one. It's like, this is not working. But man, the hypocrisy in the American government, in that, right, it's so clear. And we can look at that. We can look at kind of what happened in the 60s with psychedelics. We can look at what happened in the, early 20th century, or even what's going on now in the whole opioid crisis and, the American government's complicity in all of that. Which it's not a movie. Actually, maybe it is a movie. I feel like it's maybe a TV show, but I think maybe it was a movie on the owner of Purdue Pharmaceuticals. Matthew Broderick plays him. I just saw it maybe like a month or two ago. And it's, it's like this kind of dramatization of how they developed a plan to push opioids on people. So, but fell asleep. Interesting subject, though. I think that'd be. I don't know about psychedelic movies, but
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm not certain how that's gonna stack up.
yeah, because like,
Some of the older ones, about 70s, 90s, will look at hippie, and that's when they kind of came back after the war on drugs. But it's an interesting time in history looking at those, because previous to the FDA outlawing them, they were being tested for medicinal use.
Yeah.
They've been used for thousands of years by Native Americans, like peyote, for
Right.
religious and spiritual. So,
which again is definitely not. I mean, I've never done peyote or ayahuasca or any of that, but like, not addictive. Like, you puke your guts out. Like, I don't
actually,
get
did
it.
you know it's a woman who was in Moscow, they eat for a Native
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. That sounds about on brand for our policies on things.
I was just gonna say that the part that gets funnier, the more you look into herbal medicine and stuff like that, you look at big pharma and the things that over the years, lawn pesticides, herbicides, like dandelions and all this, nature, benefits that you look into what dandelion roots we use for it, really hilarious. So excited to see that and the growth of big pharma and the decrease of herbal medicine is absolutely hysterical and fascinating.
Yeah, which like on a thematic level, I don't have films like off the top of my head for this, but you could even look at like 3 different industries through films that would be appropriate, and look at the industrialization of different industries. Like the food industry is changed wildly. We've got more documentary stuff on that than maybe films. But same thing for pharmaceuticals, same thing for education. So, right? Like there's a lot of different ones there. So yeah. Fun stuff. I'm definitely looking. I like these papers, especially because nobody's writing the same paper. Even if you take the same subject, it's there's too many films for everybody to land on the exact same thing. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, this is a long list to peruse. You're probably familiar with quite a few of the movies on here. But like I said, if you're thinking about a topic or subject and let me know, because I can definitely kind of help narrow in the focus of your paper for that.
I've been trying to brainstorm as we've been talking, so now I think I've got a couple of options. I think I want to kind of dig into the like the mental health aspect. I just don't know. I've got like a handful, but I'm not familiar enough with the movies, you know, if they really have a similar enough effect to make a American connection.
Okay.
Joker is absolutely one of my favorites. So when that got mentioned, I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's definitely like a good route to
Yeah.
dig into. And then Split. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie.
Is that the John
Um,
McAvoy? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And then out of sight, or no, out of mind, out of sight. I'm not familiar with that one, but it popped up as like American history
What's it about?
supposed to be a mental health movie, like 2014 film. It talks about the 18 months that they filmed Navy Guys for patients at the Brockville Mental Health Center in Ontario.
Oh, is it a documentary or a?
It says it, oh, it is documentary.
So
It was actually like a movie.
yeah, like I mean, geez, we're living in the golden age of documentaries and docuseries these days, which I love. I'm a fan. I'd say stay away from documentaries. In general, just to keep the cohesion of comparing films. I don't want you going too literal with the documentaries, but then I also don't want to go too far off the path from history. So like Split is a great movie. I'd say if you're going to do that subject, like do that or Joker, but not both of them. Because neither one of them are historical films at all, right? So there's like, I feel like there's room for one of those. And I'd pick Joker over Split just because it's set in a different time too, kind of. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, right? Like, at least at the beginning, you're like, what time, where are we? You know, and what's going on. But yeah, so One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is definitely a great film for talking about mental health in America. I'm just scanning through this list right here. On the Road might be a good film for you, Jack Kerouac. He's kind of the beatnik father, the predecessors for the hippies. I think it's not on here. Serpico reminded me of it. Dog Day Afternoon. That should be on here. That's a good movie. That's definitely about somebody's struggle with mental health. The Aviator is also another great choice. It's about Howard Hughes, and he, famously like unravels for the second part of his life and becomes a recluse. Yeah, those are it's probably the best out of this, but there's other options as well.
I'll keep thinking on it too.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
So I've been thinking of what ideas that I wanted to explore in more time. I've already thought about the two movies that I should take off from right there being
both The Godfather and, what's it called, Goodfellas.
Mhm.
I want to do those two, but then I also want like a third movie, and I've been thinking of a bunch of movies that I know deal with organized crime. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what would be like the best out of the three that I'm thinking of being, The Departed, Casino, and then Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
I've been thinking of those three, and I'm trying to like think to myself, like, what would be the best to fit in like this third section off of the list I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I feel like, so Godfather and, what was the other one you said?
Goodfellas?
Goodfellas, right? So they're both like Italian mob movies. Casino, I think fits that bill really well. Donnie Brasco does as well. And it's kind of interesting because it's from the angle of like a
Angled from like,
law enforcement
yeah, law
perspective.
enforcement, FBI.
Yeah, like, I don't know. That's a good choice. I like Donnie Brasco for that. Just because it's the same but different.
It's the same but different, and it's a totally different point of view.
Yeah,
Instead of being just from the point of view from the crime family itself, it's from a law enforcement point of view.
yeah. I think that would be
Yeah.
that'd be a nice rounder out for
Yeah,
that.
nice round off, give a good point of view on
Yeah.
organized crime.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Yeah, right, yeah, Donnie Brasco.
Awesome. No. Oh. Okay, good questions, thoughts, ideas. Anything else? Cool. We'll put a pin in it there.
From an example.
Yes. Let me talk about that. Somebody else asked about that. So it'll be like the first exam in terms of multiple choice questions, matching, putting stuff in order maybe. There's no essay stuff in any of the tests. Except for the last one, there's like, I don't know, like a 50-point question that's like a no wrong answer kind of question. It's what's something that what's something you learned or we studied this semester that changed your worldview, like it changed how you see the world or society or something like that. So the only wrong answer is just a very short, crappy answer. Like, I don't care what it is that you pick and talk about. Just, like, give me a couple paragraphs on it. Just don't phone it in. So it's not meant to be a hard question at all. It's just like a simple thought reflection. But outside of that, there's no writing involved. This should cover from World War I to World War II. So 1914 to 1945. That's like about where we're going for, which works out good because that's, we've managed to stay somewhat on schedule for class, which I'm grateful for because I always fall behind in teaching history class because just get stuck in places and take too long on certain elements. So yeah, that's the test number 2.